Wonderful day, wonderful day, wonderful day. This is your neighborhood Sensei Fouché, telling all y'all to stay woke. Relax. 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 Make sure you take notes. So, let me welcome all of you wonderful people that have decided to follow and tune in to the reprogramming sessions that I have started to construct in successions. I feel honored and enlightened to have moments to share a lot of the information that I have absorbed and researched. So welcome and thank you. Moving forward, let me also state that all music on the platform is provided by J.F. Winter of Nasty Noise Music Productions. That is N.M.P. is the acronym. YouTube.com/@NNMP1993. So, moving forward from our intro, our current chapter and topic is Enlightened Relationships. And this is chapter 8 into this fantastic guide, The Power of Now, A Guide to Spiritual Enlightenment by Eckhart Tolle, spelled first name Eckhart, last name Tolle, Eckhart Tolle. And it's a guide to spiritual enlightenment, or to be specific, to submerging the evil of you and resurrecting the true deep God inside of you. You know what I'm saying? Because all of these factions keep trying to allow, or even more so, willingly give your power and honor to something outside of you before you ingratiate to the deepest of respect and love what's inside of you. And, you know, the one thing that I think about in relationships, and I believe I was talking about this yesterday, is, you know, people are seeking love. As we well know, that's a common term. I'm looking for love. I'm looking for love because I need for someone to love me. And that's usually the common reference or statement, is you're always seeking some outside validation because of what you lack within yourself. And you're looking for something else to fill what you don't have. And that's basically, in simple statement, two incomplete people. And we were speaking yesterday in the last conversation about, if you are operating at 30% and someone else is operating at 25%, both of you together only make 55%, which is still incomplete. So if this person is not complete within themselves and you're not complete within yourself, then how can you complete each other? And people would say, well, what about if I have 50 and he has 50? Well, then you stand a 50% chance. You know what I'm saying? Well, that equals 100. Well, when you're operating at 50 and they're operating at 50, even though mathematically those two 50s make up 100, like you're both still half complete. So, yeah, there's a chance, but at the same time, there probably isn't a chance as well. When each individual is operating at 100% individually and they decide to integrate their complete forces together, that makes 200%, which is 100 each complete, which pretty much almost guarantees success. Like there's almost like a can't lose in that situation. And there's always the slight possibility, but the probability in succession is extremely more definitive than two incomplete people merging together and believing to be the strongest of a force in incomplete unison. And if you want to rationalize that into making sense and saying that that sounds fulfilling and worthwhile and probable in succession, then go for it. I mean, prove me wrong. You know what I'm saying? Because if someone knows something for sure different than what I'm speaking, then please let me know. I will be happy to claim misinformed and reintroduce myself into a different direction of education in order to be clear. So I heard something today in relation to support pet. And the reason why I mentioned that is because, you know, when you feel a lack of love, you want something to love you. And usually people that don't relate well with other people, their fallback is, well, you know, humans suck and, you know, animals don't talk back to you. Well, they do, except you don't speak the same specific vocabulary to where there is a clear understanding of expression. You know, usually you're making relation to the probability of how they feel based on what you wish for them to feel or hope for them to be thinking in the aspect of feeling. But animals aren't as interpersonal in their feelings as deeply as specifically human beings. You know what I'm saying? So if you think that these support pets make you feel not lonely, like that's really not true. Because even in speaking to the pet, in a lot of the things that I've followed and have had in study, those people would still speak to the pets, wishing that they were able to have a connection with other human beings, and then minimizing their worth by stating that they're probably only able, or their existence only is supposed to surround around lower level beings because that's all they could connect to. Well, animals are the only things that understand me. Well, from a psychological standpoint, you have more enhanced wiring within your programming, which tricks you into emotional patterns that probably don't agree into the relation of the animal kingdom, because their psychology and their understanding of being is way more simplistic than these complicated human minds. So in that regard, people become addicted to things or other people. When these incomplete relationships are extremely notable in the lack of agreement, the frustration always follows into a validation based on fear. You know that things aren't in agreement or don't feel in a form of completion, but your deep addiction for company is stronger because you are not comfortable within your own company. So being that you're not comfortable within your own company, then you seek for the company of someone else in order to not feel the environment or the atmosphere of being alone. The thing about it is, people that are comfortable in being alone are never lonely. And you're like, well, how do you mean that? Being alone is just a moment of choice. When you engage within the aspect of public interrelation or interaction, you are confident in your assertiveness, knowing that it is easily agreeable for you to move within society and never be uncomfortable. So you can be in your own solitude and comfortable and amongst other people and as comfortable, regardless of the specifics into the higher elevated or lack of within that environment. If it's a chaotic environment and you are of a high enlightenment, it's an irritation, but your experience and knowledge into self-awareness immediately identifies the situation and the possibility of there being a probable discouragement. And in your instinctive intelligence of reprogramming, you understand how to immediately remedy from extreme progression towards displeasure. All that being said is, most people that aren't comfortable within their own existence of living have different forms of applying addictive behavior. You don't necessarily have to be into alcohol or some form of hard drug activity in order to be labeled addictive. And some people make relation into sex addicts. And yeah, that's another form of addiction. Abusive addiction. And we're going to go into this a little bit more when we go into this book. And I think that's what we're about to do, so that way we could be in more full explanation into our opening monologue to lead into our main subject topic, which is chapter 8 of The Power of Now, A Guide to Spiritual Enlightenment by Eckhart Tolle. And like I said, again, we're in chapter 8. And the subtopic within chapter where we're at is addiction and the search for wholeness. So in my opening monologue, we're going to read into professional scripture to match what my reference explanation of choice was before this now moment we're about to lead towards. So again, sip of water. Addiction and the search for wholeness. The reason why the romantic love relationship is such an intense and universally sought after experience is that it seems to offer liberation from a deep-seated state of fear, need, lack, and incompleteness that is part of the human condition in its unredeemed and unenlightened state. There is a physical as well as a psychological dimension to this state. On the physical level, you are obviously not whole, nor will you ever be. You are either a man or a woman, which is easy to say, one half of the whole. On this level, the longing for wholeness, the return to oneness, manifests as male-female attraction. Man's need for a woman, woman's need for a man. It is almost an irresistible urge for union with the opposite energy polarity. The root of this physical urge is a spiritual one, the longing for an end to duality. a return to the state of wholeness. Sexual union is the closest you can get to this state on the physical level. This is why it is the most deeply satisfying experience the physical realm can offer. But sexual union is no more than a fleeting glimpse of wholeness, an instant of bliss, only a small fraction of a largest of a moment. As long as it is unconsciously sought as a means of salvation, you are seeking the end of duality on the level of form, where it cannot be found. You cannot find the deepest of love from outside of you. It is deeply within you. You are giving a tantalizing glimpse of heaven, but you are not allowed to dwell there and find yourself again in a separate body. On the psychological level, the sense of lack and incompleteness is, if anything, even greater than on the physical level. As long as you are identified with the mind, you have an externally derived sense of self. That is to say, you get your sense of who you are from the things that ultimately have nothing to do with who you are. Your social role, possessions, external appearance, success and failures, belief systems, and so on. But nothing is ever enough to give it lasting fulfillment. Its fear remains. Its sense of lack and neediness remains. But then that special relationship comes along. It seems to be the answer to all the ego's problems and to meet all its needs. At least this is how it appears at first. All the other things that you derived your sense of self from before now become relatively insignificant. You now have a single focal point that replaces them all, that gives meaning to your life and through which you define your identity, the person you are in love with. You are no longer a disconnected fragment in an uncaring universe, or so it seems. Your world now has a center, the loved one. And then let me stop right there and interject, because you wonder why that other person can't love you to the level that you want them to, is because they are not centered themselves. They don't love themselves to the degree that you need for them to love you. The same as you can't love to the degree to compensate them for what they need. The fact that the center is outside you and that therefore you still have an externally derived sense of self does not seem to matter at first. What matters is that the underlying feelings of incompleteness, of fear, lack, and unfulfillment, so characteristic of the egoic state, are no longer there. Or are they? Have they dissolved, or do they continue to exist underneath the happy surface reality? You basically playing smoke and mirrors. You can act like, you happy, but you know that you aren't happy. That other person really doesn't make you happy. If they're not around for the moment, they got to go to work or whatever, you're like, Oh, I miss you so much. I wish you was always around me. Well, that's not realistic, because if they're always around you and they're not able to earn income, then there's a problem. Then you're like, oh, well, why you always got to be around me? You have to, you're not pulling your weight. Then it's a problem. Like I said, it's that conundrum. You know what I'm saying? Because that's that conscious con continuing to punish you in different laughable techniques in order for you to continue to stay and be weak. Because as long as you continue to stay and be weak, it continues to be in full control. Confusing ego attachment. Addictive clinging with love. True love has no opposite. If your love has an opposite, then it is not love, but a strong ego need for a more complete and deeper sense of self. A need that the other person temporarily meets. It is the ego's substitution for salvation. And for a short time, it almost does feel like salvation. So let me go back for a minute. What matters is the underlying feelings of incompleteness. But before that, the fact that the center is outside of you and that before you still have an externally derived sense of self does not seem to matter at first. What matters is that the underlying feelings of incompleteness, of fear, lack, and unfulfillment, so characteristic of the egoic state, are no longer there. Or are they? Have they dissolved? Or do they continue to exist underneath the happy surface reality? Confusing ego attachment and addictive clinging with love. And the reason why I stated those two things is because when you aren't really happy, the reality is you still have a confusing ego with attachment, and you have an addictive clinging behavior in regards to love. And love should be free. It should not be extremely strenuous or over-dependent. So then it reads further, true love has no opposite. If your love has an opposite, then it is not love, but a strong ego need for a more complete and deeper sense of self, a need that the other person temporarily meets. It is the ego substitute for salvation, and for a short time it almost does feel like salvation. But there comes a point when your partner behaves in ways that fail to meet your needs, or rather those of your ego. Just as with every other addiction, you are on a high when the drug is available. But invariably, there comes a time when the drug no longer works for you, when those painful feelings reappear. You feel them even more strongly than before. And what is more, you now perceive your partner as the cause of those feelings. This means that you project them outward and attack the other with all the savage violence that is part of your pain. This attack may awaken the partner's own pain, and he or she may counter your attack. Every addiction arises from an unconscious refusal to face and move through your own pain. Every addiction starts with pain and ends with pain. When you start the argument part of the relationship, you're in pain, and when you break up, as much as you say, oh man, I'm glad, you still have a residual holdover, which is pain. Whatever the substance you are addicted to, You are using something or somebody to cover up your pain. That is why, after the initial euphoria has passed, there is so much unhappiness, so much pain in intimate relationships. They do not cause pain and unhappiness. Excuse me. They bring out the pain and unhappiness that is already in you. Addiction does that. Every addiction reaches a point where it does not work for you anymore. And then you feel the pain more intensely than ever. Think about an alcoholic. You know what I'm saying? You used to drink a certain amount and it used to satisfy you. Now you drink that same amount and it doesn't satisfy you, and you are no longer in a happy, giddy, goofy mood. You are frustrated, depressed, and in sufferance because you lack the need of more of something that you used as a fulfillment of joy. But then you need more. It's never enough. And that goes into that addiction. This is one reason why most people are always trying to escape from the present moment and are seeking some kind of salvation in the future. The first thing that they might encounter if they focus their attention on the now is their own pain, and this is what they fear. Avoidance of relationships in an attempt to avoid pain is not the answer either. The pain is there anyway. 3 failed relationships in as many years are more likely to force you into awakening than 3 years on a desert island or shut away in your room. But if you could bring intense presence in your aloneness, that would work for you too. From addictive to enlightened relationships. That's going to be our next subtopic in chapter title. Pardon me, I got stuck for a minute. For love to flourish, the light of your presence needs to be strong enough so that you no longer get taken over by the thinker or the pain body and mistake them for who you are. So that goes into what I was telling you before, is if you are only 50% and the other person is only 50%, yeah, there might be a chance, but I'm going to bet more than likely against. And that's because you need to be most fulfilled individually each in order to collectively be in the most unbreakable connection. To know yourself as the being underneath the thinker, the stillness underneath the mental noise, the love and joy underneath the pain is freedom, salvation, enlightenment. To disidentify from the pain body is to bring presence into the pain and thus transmute it. To disidentify from thinking is to be silent watcher, is to be the silent watcher of your thoughts and behavior, especially the repetitive patterns of your mind and the roles played by the ego. You need to be into the deepest self-evaluation and be honest and truthful into your lacking and weakness, your addiction. If you stop investing in it with selfness, the mind loses its compulsive quality, which basically is the compulsion to judge and so to resist what is, which creates conflict, drama, and new pain. And we're just going to keep rolling because we've read all of this for all of these chapters leading up to now. And if you need to go back, don't be embarrassed. Go back. This is going to be here waiting. It's not going anywhere. First, you stop judging yourself, then you stop judging your partner. That immediately takes you beyond ego. There are no victims and no perpetrators anymore. This is when you're actually open and honest into your failures before the other person's failures. If you admit into your failures, the other person should open into theirs. And if they don't, then that tells you that they are still very rejecting. This is also the end of all codependency, of being drawn into somebody else's unconscious pattern and thereby enabling it to continue. You will then either separate in love or move ever more deeply into the now together into being. Love is a state of being. Your love is not outside. It is deep within you. You can never lose it, and it cannot leave you. It is not dependent on some other body, some external form. And I've been saying this, and we're about to keep moving forward because this is how dead on point I am connected to this information. You look beyond the veil of form and separation. This is the realization of oneness. This is love. So let's rewind and fall back into fold. Love is a state of being. Your love is not outside. It is deep within you. You can never lose it, and it cannot leave you. It is not dependent on some other body, some external form. You look beyond the veil of form and separation. This is the realization of oneness. This is love. What is God? The eternal one life underneath all forms of life. What is love? To feel the presence of that one life deep within yourself and within all creatures. To be with it. Therefore, all love is the love of God. Love is not selective. So when they tell me through these broadcasts on sports, oh, I want to thank God for making my team win. He knew that, he wanted us to, succeed. And I'm like, wait up. So now all of a sudden, like, this external God picks favorites, but he's supposed to love everybody. But he's going to pick you more than that person because you're more deserving than those other folks. Like, that all just doesn't even connect right. Love is not selective, just as the light of the sun is not selective. It does not make one person special, right? The sun doesn't just shine on one person, it shines on everybody. It's not selective. So when you start giving idolization and worshiping into these things that are understood to be selective, that is you giving your power to something else instead of harnessing and evolutionizing it within you. Love is not exclusive. Exclusivity is not the love of God, but the love of the ego. Have you ever been in a relationship? I want you to love me and not anybody else. Right? And usually in those type of situations, like, they're jealous of, close family members, and not family members that are problematic, but family members that are encouraging and extremely helpful. Like they'll start being vindictive and jealous of them because those people have a moral foundation and a compass to their life, and the true nature of those insecure people, it is going to compromise that. So before the compromise takes place, they are going to try to seclude you. And in the process of making that seclusion possible, they are going to label you, judge you, and speak illy of you, and basically assassinate your character in order for the person that they want to have control of their feelings to willfully give them the control of it. There may be one person who reflects your love back to you more clearly and more intensely than others. And if that person feels the same towards you, it can be said that you are in a love relationship with him or her. The bond that connects you with that person is the same bond that connects you with the person sitting next to you on a bus, or with a bird, a tree, a flower. Only the degree of intensity with which it is felt differs. Like, why can't you love your neighbor and also love your intimate partner? But the intimate partner's relationship has a different level of base connection than the simple societal interrelation that you would commonly have amongst other people within this world of your necessary interactive movements within the world, outside of those intimate relationships. Even in an otherwise addictive relationship, there may be moments when something more real shines through, something beyond your mutual addictive needs. This may sometimes happen during physical intimacy, or when you are both witnessing the miracle of childbirth, or in the presence of death, or when one of you is seriously ill. Anything that renders the mind powerless. When this happens, your being, which is usually buried underneath the mind, becomes revealed. And it is this that makes true communication possible. True communication is communion, the realization of oneness, which is love. The sad thing which they're stating is the rare moments when these supposed deepest of moral feelings actually surface is there has to be some form of extreme hurt or a catastrophe to the person's well-being in order for people to momentarily have the deepest level of compassion. But soon as the person starts to become well or heal, then it falls back into that manipulative pattern of selfishness, of neediness, of addiction. Love cannot flourish unless you are permanently free of mind identification and your presence is intense enough to have dissolved the pain body, or you can at least remain present as the watcher. The pain body cannot then take you over and so become destructive of love. And we're going to leave at that point, because when we come back, we're going to get into more of the uplifting direction in which we want these interactive, intimate relationships to move and flourish from. And that goes into our subtopic, into chapter title, Relationships as Spiritual Practice. So how do you practice being more spiritual in the aspect of having these relationships. And that's a lot that we've covered today. And I want you to really process yourself and truly the level of completeness that you realistically have with yourself, and realistically the addictive nature that you carry in connection to these incomplete relationships or relations or incomplete related people. Like, there has to be a rewiring and a reframing of our projection towards truth. And tomorrow's another day, like I said. And this was a wonderful moment. So just relax. You know what I'm saying? Go, if need be, I recommend Round the Clock Thinkers, Packboy Dolo, massage therapy after this intense workout with your neighborhood sensei Fouché, who tells all y'all to stay woke. But he wants you to learn how to relax. Peacefully relax. Deeply and meditatively relax. Grab some tools of notation and comfortably, patiently, and calmly take notes. Be smooth. 1.